Welcome to Qualys Vulnerability Management Training. We'll begin this course with a quick review of some of the things you'll need, like a lab document and a student trial account, to successfully complete the training. I'll then provide an overview of the Qualys Cloud Platform and the Qualys Vulnerability Management application. From there, we'll move right into the Vulnerability Management user interface and focus on setting up your account to perform the lab exercises we have prepared for you. The next section will focus on the Qualys knowledge base, where you'll learn about vulnerability QIDs and how to build your own custom list of QIDs called a search list. The vulnerability assessment section will focus primarily on the process of using a Qualys vulnerability scan to perform a host assessment. However, Appendix E of the lab exercise document provides steps for installing Qualys Cloud Agent, which is another option for collecting the data needed to perform a vulnerability assessment. In the Assets and Inventory section, we'll examine the various ways the Qualys Cloud Platform allows you to view and manage the host assets throughout your organization. You'll use the real-time threat indicators provided by the Qualys Threat Protection application to quickly identify which of your detected vulnerabilities are being targeted by known threats. The reporting section will focus on the basic concepts of building vulnerability and patch reports and sharing this information with your operational and patch teams. The user management section will discuss the various roles that you can use to create and manage user accounts within your Qualys subscription. And finally, the remediation section will highlight the remediation and ticketing capabilities built into the Qualys Vulnerability Management application. Lab exercises are at the end of most discussion topics that will help you get hands-on experience with the Vulnerability Management application and other applications within the Qualys Cloud Platform. The Qualys Training and Certification Portal, qualys.com/learning, is your source for all Qualys training material. Here you will find the Vulnerability Management Lab exercise document and presentation slides. If you've not already downloaded these documents, please do so now. You will need some type of PDF file reader like Adobe Acrobat to view these files. Once you've completed the vulnerability management videos and labs, you can launch the VM certification exam from this site. You'll find a link to reset your learner account password just below the sign-in button. To perform the lab exercises in this course, each participant is provided with a Qualys student trial account. The account credentials are sent to the email address identified in your learner account user profile. Please note, the learning management system will not send a student trial account to a public email domain. Be sure to check your spam or junk mail folders for your student trial account credentials. You'll find instructions to activate and set up your student trial account in Lab 1 of the lab exercise document. The lab exercises in this course demonstrate the various features and benefits of the vulnerability management application using traditional Qualys scanner appliances, especially those that are in the Qualys Cloud's pool of external scanners. If you would also like to see how Qualys Cloud Agent supports and interacts with the vulnerability management application, Lab Appendix E will provide you with Cloud Agent installation instructions. For even more details and information on deploying and managing agents, see the Qualys Cloud Agent self-paced training course. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a model of the vulnerability management lifecycle, along with an overview of the Qualys Cloud Platform. The topics in this course will be presented in sections that reflect the various phases of the vulnerability management lifecycle illustrated here. Phase 1 of this lifecycle recognizes the significance of asset discovery to all other components of vulnerability management. It can be very difficult or challenging to protect assets that you can't see or assets you are unaware of. The Qualys Cloud Platform provides multiple technologies, including scanner appliances, agents, sensors, and connectors to help you detect and discover both on-premise and cloud-based host assets. With Qualys scanners, agents, sensors, and connectors working together to identify host assets throughout your entire enterprise architecture, the Qualys Asset View and Asset Inventory applications provide the type of features to help you manage and organize these assets. You'll create both asset groups and asset tags in this course to help you manage the host assets or IPs in the Qualys Training Lab. The asset groups and tags you create will become ideal targets for performing vulnerability scans in the assessment phase. The primary objective of the assessment phase is finding vulnerabilities on the host assets in your Qualys subscription. The data needed to perform a vulnerability assessment can come from a combination of Qualys sensors, scanner appliances, or agents. Regardless of the data collection techniques you use, all findings are securely stored in the Qualys Cloud Platform, where reporting tools and features allow you to identify the vulnerabilities that pose the greatest risk to your organization and share these findings with your patch and operational teams. The remediation tools and features built into the vulnerability management application will help you prioritize detected vulnerabilities and identify the vulnerabilities that have been successfully mitigated. The very last phase of the vulnerability management lifecycle verifies any vulnerabilities that have been patched or fixed. This task is performed automatically every time a scanner appliance, agent, or sensor provides new assessment data to the Qualys Cloud Platform. The assessment test that was originally used to detect a vulnerability will be used again to verify the application of a patch or fix. The steps or phases of this lifecycle model are designed to be repeated continuously as progress is made towards identifying and mitigating vulnerabilities within your organization. The Qualys Vulnerability Management application leverages core components within the Qualys Cloud Platform to help you mitigate vulnerabilities throughout your entire enterprise architecture, including your cloud-based assets. You'll find lab exercises in this course that provide steps for launching scans using scanner appliances from the Qualys Cloud Platform's external scanner pool. Our training lab targets live in a typical DMZ environment where the perimeter firewall has been configured to allow packets from the Qualys external scanner pool. External scanner appliances are ideal for scanning public-facing targets or host assets with a public IP address. By default, any Qualys user with scanning privileges has access to the external scanner pool. Internal scanner appliances are commonly used to scan host assets that reside on private IP subnets, like LAN 2 in this diagram. Deploying an internal scanner appliance as a member of this subnet will allow you to scan all LAN 2 assets directly without the obstacle of network filtering devices. Qualys provides hardware-based internal scanner appliances as well as virtual scanner appliances that run on popular hypervisor and cloud platforms. LAN 1 in this diagram presently does not have a scanner appliance and is isolated from the rest of the network by a firewall. To meet the vulnerability management objectives for this subnet, Qualys Cloud Agent will be installed on each LAN 1 host. Each agent will collect metadata from its host and send it to the Qualys Cloud Platform for processing. Vulnerability assessment tests, all the heavy lifting, are intentionally kept off the agent and performed within the Qualys Cloud Platform. Qualys Cloud Agent is ideal for remote users or any host assets that are difficult to scan, and it can be deployed on assets that are hosted by your cloud service providers. Presently, Qualys Cloud Agent supports the operating systems listed here: Windows, RPM-based versions of Linux including Red Hat, Oracle, CentOS, and others, Debian and Ubuntu Linux, Mac OS X, and IBM AIX. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. In this video, I'll demonstrate the process of activating your Qualys account and navigating around the Qualys user interface. We'll take a quick look at adding host assets to your subscription and launching an initial scan. To activate your account, open a browser to your Qualys login page and enter your account credentials. If this is your first time to log in, accept the service user agreement and change your password. You'll need to log back into the Qualys user interface after successfully changing your password. Once you have logged back in, click the Enable Now button to activate the new data security model and gain access to advanced features and services. Most of the time and attention in this course will be spent right here in the Qualys Vulnerability Management application. Use the application picker to access other applications within the Qualys Cloud Platform. Online help is available that will provide you with getting started information for general topics like scanning, reporting, and remediation. Or use the online help search tool to find information on specific topics or configuration settings. The tools and features within each application are divided between different sections and tabs. Click on any section menu to access the various tools and features available within each tab. You'll find the security settings for your account here under the Setup tab within the User section. Here you can change various security settings for your account and view the features that have been activated by enabling the new data security model. If the new data security model has not yet been enabled within your student trial account, you'll see a checkbox to opt in here. The security settings that you select will impact all user accounts within your subscription. Before you can begin scanning a host asset, you must first add it to your Qualys subscription. Navigate to the Assets section to add host assets to your subscription. From here, click the Host Assets tab. This is where you add host assets you intend to scan. The tracking method you select will determine how vulnerability findings are stored for each host. Your options include IP address tracking, DNS tracking, or NetBIOS tracking. A fourth tracking method, the Qualys Host ID, is used by default when you install or deploy Qualys Cloud Agent on a host asset. The Qualys Host ID is also available for your scannable host assets through the agentless tracking feature. For this demonstration, I'll select the IP address tracking method. Click Host IPs, enter your list of host IP addresses, and click the Add button. Click Apply to indicate you have permission to scan these IPs and add them to your account. The host assets added now appear under the Host Assets tab. Let's take a quick look at how agent host assets are displayed in the Vulnerability Management application. Agent host assets can be added to your account through the Qualys Cloud Agent application. If you deploy one or more agents, they will appear under the Assets tab with the Agent Tracking method, which is the Qualys Host ID. The Qualys Host ID is created to be universally unique for each host, and it can be used by your scannable host assets when the agentless tracking feature is enabled. Let's launch an initial scan of the Qualys Training Lab targets. A common convention within the Qualys user interface is called the Quick Actions menu. You'll find that most of the objects within the Qualys user interface have a Quick Actions menu. From the Host Assets tab, I can use the Quick Actions menu to edit existing host assets, or in this case, I'll use it to launch my initial scan. I'll leave the option profile set to the initial options. Even though I haven't added any internal scanner appliances to my account, the Qualys pool of external scanners will be used by default, which will work just fine for our public-facing targets. After launching my initial scan, I'll navigate over to the Scans tab to monitor its progress. My initial vulnerability scan is now queued up and will begin running in just a few moments. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a tour of the Qualys Knowledge Base, the most up-to-date and comprehensive vulnerability knowledge base in the security industry. To view the Qualys Knowledge Base, open the Vulnerability Management application, navigate to the Knowledge Base section, and select the Knowledge Base tab. Qualys Knowledge Base lists thousands of confirmed vulnerabilities, potential vulnerabilities, and information gathered data. Each item in the knowledge base is assigned a unique Qualys identifier, or QID. The Qualys knowledge base is updated continuously with new QIDs containing new vulnerability signatures. The colorful icons associated with a QID represent the different properties or characteristics of its associated vulnerability. Here's a list of the various icons found in the Qualys knowledge base. A pencil icon identifies QIDs that have been edited by a manager user. Only the manager user role can edit QIDs in your account knowledge base. The green Wi-Fi antenna icon identifies vulnerabilities that can be detected remotely by a Qualys scanner appliance without the use of authentication. If authentication is required for successful vulnerability detection, the QID will be associated with this blue key icon. The red cross icon identifies vulnerabilities that are patchable. QIDs with the red cross icon typically provide a direct link to the vendor's patch. The black hat icon is used to identify vulnerabilities that have a known exploit. The red hazardous material icon identifies vulnerabilities associated with malware. The blue gear icon is associated with vulnerabilities that can potentially be protected from exploits by making specific configuration changes on the target host. The hex-shaped icon identifies vulnerabilities that are associated with services that are not currently running. To view vulnerability severity levels, click the widget icon and select the checkbox to display the severity column. Qualys severity levels are now associated with each QID. Let's take a closer look at the different severity color codes. The QIDs in the Qualys knowledge base are color-coded to make it easier to distinguish between confirmed vulnerabilities, potential vulnerabilities, and information-gathered data. Most of the vulnerabilities in the Qualys knowledge base have one or more active tests that can be used to confirm the presence of the vulnerability. Vulnerabilities of this type, confirmed vulnerabilities, are color-coded red. If an active test is not available to confirm the presence of a vulnerability, it is categorized as a potential vulnerability and color-coded yellow. Potential vulnerabilities will typically need to be verified through your own manual investigation. Information gathered data, or IG data for short, consists of various configuration settings and other host inventory and scan information. Information gathered QIDs are not vulnerabilities and are color-coded blue. If you scroll through the Qualys knowledge base, eventually you'll come across a vulnerability severity that is half red and half yellow. These types of vulnerabilities have two very predictable scan results depending on your use of authentication. In the first example, a host is scanned without using authentication credentials. Qualys refers to this as an untrusted scan. QID 90244, one of the half red, half yellow QIDs, is detected, but without the benefit of authentication, it is displayed as a potential vulnerability. When the very same host is scanned again in authenticated mode, what Qualys refers to as a trusted scan, QID 90244 is detected and confirmed, successfully illustrating the impact of authentication on the half-red, half-yellow QIDs. To help you determine which vulnerabilities to address or mitigate first, Qualys provides severity levels or rankings for both confirmed and potential vulnerabilities. A severity level 5 vulnerability is the most urgent because it presents the greatest risk to your organization. Potentially, a severity 5 vulnerability could allow an attacker to gain root or admin privileges to the vulnerable host. Severity level 3 and 4 vulnerabilities also involve some type of potential compromise of the host system or one of its applications or services. A severity level 1 vulnerability is the least urgent. Severity level 1 and 2 vulnerabilities involve the disclosure of sensitive data that could potentially be very useful to an attacker. Organizations should develop a strategy for mitigating detected vulnerabilities based on these severity levels. Because of their increased risk and exposure, most organizations address the severity 3, 4, and 5 vulnerabilities first. However, the collective risk created by numerous low-severity vulnerabilities should not be overlooked. Column options are also available to view different types of CVSS scores. The Common Vulnerability Scoring System is the de facto standard for the payment card industry data security standard. Although you'll find current and comprehensive vulnerability information right here in the Qualys knowledge base, you'll find additional links for various QIDs that will connect you to the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures website, various software vendor websites, and bug track data provided by the Security Focus website. Click on any CVE, software vendor, or bug track link to extend the information already provided within the Qualys knowledge base. The published date of any QID identifies when Qualys added the QID to the knowledge base. Subsequent changes to the published QID will be reflected in the modified date. With tens of thousands of QIDs in the Qualys knowledge base, you'll want to take advantage of the numerous search options available in the Knowledge Base Search tool. From the Knowledge Base tab, click the Search button. The Search tool provides more than 30 different options for locating specific QIDs or types of vulnerabilities within the knowledge base, including QID number and vulnerability title. The discovery method will allow you to choose from remote discovery that does not use authentication, authenticated discovery, or both. Some of the search options feature a NOT operator, which allows you to exclude QIDs that match your search criteria. Search for vulnerabilities that already have an available patch or those that have no patch solution at all. You can perform searches using CVE IDs, various CVSS scores, bug track IDs, and even the date QIDs were published or modified. For this example, I'm going to search for all Severity 5 vulnerabilities, both confirmed and potential. When my search results are displayed, I can use the Quick Actions menu to view the information inside any QID. Each QID provides general information and details, including a vulnerability's associated threats, the impact or outcome of a vulnerability coming into contact with a known threat, and of course the solution for patching, fixing, or mitigating the vulnerability. Only a manager user can edit the QIDs in your account knowledge base. Although Qualys already assigns appropriate severity levels to each vulnerability, a manager user can make adjustments to these severity levels. Disabling a vulnerability here in the knowledge base will prevent the vulnerability from being displayed in your custom Qualys reports. Vulnerabilities that are disabled in this fashion are still detected and included in your raw scan results. Manager users can also add custom comments to the threat, impact, and solution sections of any QID. Any comments you add will appear in your custom reports. To remove editing changes from a QID, simply click the Restore Defaults button. The Knowledge Base Search tool has search options that are especially relevant to Qualys users having or about to deploy Qualys Cloud Agent. Scrolling down near the bottom of the Search tool options, you'll find the Supported Modules section. Here you can select checkboxes for the Windows Agent, Linux Agent, Mac Agent, and AIX Agent. Select the appropriate checkboxes for the agents you have or plan to deploy, and click Search to view the QIDs they cover or address. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will show you how to create and use your own custom list of QIDs from the Qualys knowledge base, or what we call a search list. Before diving into the different ways you can use a search list, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of different ways to create one. You'll find the Search List tab in 3 different places within the Vulnerability Management application. There's a Search List tab in the Scan section, one in the Report section, and another in the Knowledge Base section. All 3 tabs provide the same functionality. Notice the options for creating or adding a search list to your account. You can create a static list, a dynamic list, or import a search list from the Qualys search list library. For my first example, I'll select the dynamic list option. The list I want to create will only contain high-risk vulnerabilities, severity levels 3 through 5, and specifically those that do not have an available patch. This can be a very useful list of vulnerabilities to monitor because they will not be addressed or mitigated through your patching operations. For a dynamic search list, targeted QIDs must be specified using a list criteria, consisting of any combination of knowledge-based search options. The criteria you specify here will determine which QIDs are presently added to the list, and moving forward it will determine whether or not new QIDs get added. For this example, I'll select vulnerabilities that have no patch solution, and then scroll down to specify severity level 3, 4, and 5 vulnerabilities that can be confirmed. You can use any search options found here in the search tool to build your own custom search lists. The test button can be used to verify all of the QIDs that will be added to this list. For now, I'll just click Save. I now have a list of confirmed severity level 3, 4, and 5 vulnerabilities that do not have an available patch. New QIDs added to the Qualys knowledge base that match the list criteria will automatically get added to this dynamic list. If the list of QIDs you have in mind does not have some type of common criteria, there's the static list option. A static search list, as its name implies, contains a fixed number of QIDs and can only be created and updated manually. For this example, I'll create a list of QIDs that I like to use for analyzing scan performance and behavior. Since I already know the QID numbers I want, I'll paste them into the QIDs field and click OK. However, the Select button will give you the option of selecting the QIDs you need directly from the Qualys knowledge base. Once all QIDs have been added, click the Save button to save your static search list. The QIDs in this static list are now fixed and can only be updated manually by a Qualys user. Now that you've seen a couple of ways to create a search list, let's discuss the different ways to use the search list you've created or imported. A search list is one of the most powerful filtering tools in the Qualys Vulnerability Management application for tasks such as scanning, reporting, and remediation. For example, rather than creating a single vulnerability report that contains all vulnerabilities, severity levels 1 through 5, you can add the dynamic search list I created earlier to a report template to focus the report on high-severity vulnerabilities that have no patch. Using search lists in this fashion will help you to create vulnerability reports that focus on specific groups of vulnerabilities that are high-priority targets within your organization. When performing vulnerability scans, Qualys normally recommends using our complete list of QIDs found in the Qualys knowledge base. However, you may find the need to target a specific list of vulnerability QIDs when scanning, especially on those occasions where you don't have time to wait for a complete scan to finish. To accomplish this task, simply add your targeted list of QIDs, your search list, to a scanning option profile, and use that option profile to perform a targeted scan. Remember, Qualys normally recommends scanning for everything, and then using report templates containing targeted search lists to filter your scan results. And finally, if you need a mechanism for assigning detected vulnerabilities to the individuals or operational teams that are tasked with fixing or mitigating those vulnerabilities, a remediation policy can be used to assign a targeted list of QIDs, a search list, to any Qualys user. A special Qualys user role, the remediation user, is provided just for this purpose. You can also add a search list that contains QIDs you don't immediately intend to address to a remediation policy that automatically ignores the targeted QIDs. The lab exercises in this course provide examples of all three search list uses. You can use the Quick Actions menu to edit an existing search list or view its information. Here you will find the search list criteria, the list of QIDs, and any option profiles, report templates, or remediation policies that use this list. Distribution groups can be created to receive email notifications about updates or additions to the QIDs in any list. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a quick overview of the Qualys technologies you can use to successfully perform vulnerability assessments. The Qualys Vulnerability Management application provides more than one option for collecting the data needed to perform a host vulnerability assessment. A Qualys scanner appliance has a remote perspective of any host you target. Its ability to perform a vulnerability assessment test is directly impacted by the number and type of open service ports on any given host, as well as the presence of any network filtering devices that might potentially obstruct individual scan packets. Qualys Cloud Agent, on the other hand, is installed as a local system service on each host, one agent per host. Agents operate with system-level privileges, automatically sending assessment data back to the Qualys Cloud Platform at regularly scheduled intervals. It is common for businesses and organizations to combine both agents and scanners to meet their vulnerability assessment needs. The lab exercises in this course use the Qualys external scanner pool to demonstrate vulnerability assessment scans. Appendix E in the lab document provides steps for installing Qualys Cloud Agent. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will focus on vulnerability assessment scanning using a Qualys scanner appliance. The Qualys Vulnerability Management application uses an inference-based scanning engine that only launches the appropriate modules and assessment tests for each targeted host, which helps to increase the performance and accuracy of your vulnerability scans. Initial modules are launched at the beginning of an assessment scan to collect the data needed by the scanning engine to select the appropriate vulnerability assessment modules and tests. The primary modules that collect the host configuration data that will be used later by the scanning engine to select the appropriate assessment modules include host discovery, port scanning, service detection, and operating system detection. The host discovery module will begin the data collection process by performing some checks and probes to determine the present status of each targeted host, either alive or dead. You'll find the host discovery configuration options inside each option profile within the Additional section. One of the primary goals of host discovery is to eliminate dead hosts from your vulnerability scans. Here you can choose and customize the different probes that are used to detect host status, including TCP, UDP, or ICMP probes. Information contained in the ARP cache will also be used if your scanner appliance resides on the same subnet as the host assets you are scanning. Once the host discovery module has completed its task, a list of your live targets is passed to the port scanning module. It's the job of the port scanning module to determine which TCP and UDP ports are open, depending of course on the number of ports that you are actually targeting in your scan. The scan section of an option profile is where you specify the TCP and UDP port numbers to target in an assessment scan. The standard scan option is the most commonly used and default TCP setting. It targets the most commonly used TCP port numbers in a typical network environment, about 1900 TCP ports, which can save a considerable amount of time, especially when compared to the full option, which targets all 65,535 TCP ports. Click the View List link to identify the exact port numbers targeted by the standard and light scan options, and then use the Additional checkbox to add any additional port numbers you may need. Although the TCP protocol is connection-oriented, the task of port scanning, discovering which ports are open, does not require the completion of a TCP three-way handshake. After receiving an acknowledgement from an open port on the target host, the Qualys scanner will follow with a reset packet instead of the final acknowledgement, or what is called a half-open SYN scan. Although the option to perform a three-way handshake is available, it should typically be avoided unless you experience challenges or issues with the half-open SYN scan used by the port scanning module. You'll find full scan, standard scan, light scan, and additional port options available for the UDP protocol as well. But keep in mind that UDP is a connectionless protocol and therefore unreliable. Open UDP ports and services do not always respond to the packets they receive. As was mentioned earlier, by default, assessment scans are only performed on live host assets. You can override this default behavior by selecting the Scan Dead Host option here in the Scan section of the option profile. Once the TCP and UDP port scanning modules have completed their respective tasks, the list of open TCP and UDP ports is passed on to the Service Detection module. The Qualys Vulnerability Management application can detect over 600 different services running on both TCP and UDP ports. This is accomplished using valid protocol negotiation. IANA guidelines will initially be used to select the protocol for the very first service detection test. However, some services may be configured to use non-standard port numbers, and other services may be configured to use non-standard or unpredictable banners, which also play a role in the service detection process. If the initial test is not successful, Qualys will continue to negotiate communications with the targeted port until the correct service is identified. Once the ports and active services have been discovered on the live host assets in your scanning target, the OS detection module will then attempt to identify the operating system installed on each targeted host. At least one open TCP port is required for this task. For the most accurate operating system detection, Qualys recommends performing scans in authenticated mode. This will allow the Qualys scanner appliance to identify the exact operating system vendor and version number directly from the Windows System Registry or by executing the appropriate command. An additional benefit to scanning in authenticated mode comes from the enumeration of installed software applications, which will trigger additional vulnerability assessment modules and potentially vulnerability findings for the installed software applications on the target host. Scans performed without authentication will rely on a combination of TCP/IP stack fingerprinting with some enhanced protocol interrogation for the purpose of detecting the host operating system. Once all of the data collection tasks have been completed, the Vulnerability Management Scanning Engine will have the information it needs to begin selecting the appropriate vulnerability assessment modules for each targeted host. This information includes the host operating system, active services and ports, and the list of installed software applications. Vulnerability assessment modules perform active tests using non-intrusive vulnerability signatures. Some vulnerability assessment modules contain multiple tests, making it possible to compare and validate the collective test results and confirm the presence of a vulnerability. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will focus on the different configuration components that are required to perform a vulnerability assessment scan, and it will demonstrate using these components to launch a scan. This diagram illustrates the basic components that comprise a vulnerability scan. To launch a vulnerability assessment scan, you will certainly need at least one scanner appliance. The lab exercises in this course use the Qualys Cloud's pool of external scanners, which is the default setting for the Qualys student trial account you may be using. When selecting a scanner appliance for any scan task, you will need to consider the host assets your scan intends to target, which is another required component for launching a scan. Your scanning targets include net blocks or specific ranges of IP addresses or even a single IP address in your Qualys subscription. Host IPs must be added to your subscription first before you can scan them. Any host assets in your Qualys subscription can be added to an asset group, which is another option for targeting a scan. Asset groups allow you to manually manage and group host assets in your subscription. Asset tags, the last scan target option, provide a dynamic and automated solution for managing host assets in your Qualys subscription. For now, simply understand you can launch a scan that targets any asset groups or asset tags that you've created. You'll get an opportunity to create your own asset groups and asset tags in the lab exercises that follow. Finally, Every vulnerability assessment scan must select an option profile containing various scan preferences and scanning options. If your scan uses an option profile with authentication enabled, one more component, an authentication record, is added to the list of required scan components. Be sure to watch for these scan configuration components in the next section where I demonstrate launching a scan. Before launching a scan, let's first verify which host assets are in my subscription, here in the Assets section, under the Host Assets tab. Here I can see the Qualys Training Lab IPs have been added to my subscription and are ready to scan. Also notice that I've deployed the Qualys agent on 2 host assets. Agent host assets are easy to spot here under the Host Assets tab because they display the agent tracking method, which is the Qualys host ID mentioned earlier in this course. The exercise steps you completed in Lab 1 use the Quick Actions menu here in the Host Assets tab to launch a scan. For this demonstration, I'll navigate over to the Scans tab within the Scans section and click the New button to launch a scan. Although there are many options available, for this demonstration I'll use the Scan option to launch a manual scan. Here we can now see the different scan components mentioned earlier, including the option profile, scanner appliance, and the host assets this scan will target. To select the appropriate option profile for your scan, click inside the option profile field and select from the drop-down menu. The scanning lab exercises that follow will have you create this custom authentication profile for your authenticated scans. Let's take a quick look at some of the option profile settings you'll be using. To do this, I'll click the Select link next to the option profile field, and then click the Edit icon for the custom authentication profile. There are over a dozen different options to choose from here in the Scan section. In this course, we focus on the basic configuration settings in an option profile, such as the TCP and UDP port settings, preset scan performance options, vulnerability detection options, and the different options for performing a scan in authenticated mode. For an extended discussion of these and other scanning topics, please see the Qualys Scanning Strategies and Best Practices training course. Here, the standard scan option is used for both TCP and UDP ports. Typically, it's best to avoid scanning through network filtering devices. But when left with no choice, you'll want to ensure that network filtering devices, including host-based firewalls that would normally impede your scanning traffic, are configured to allow scanning packets on the ports you are targeting. To adjust scan performance, click the Configure button here under Performance. The preset performance settings identify the amount of bandwidth used by the scanner appliance, high, normal, and low. The low option reduces scan performance and should be used for bandwidth-restricted networks or heavy traffic environments. High provides the best scan performance and works best in network environments with ample bandwidth or light traffic. Normal provides the best balance between scan performance and bandwidth usage. The custom vulnerability detection option will allow you to target and test a specific list of QIDs from the Qualys knowledge base, using a search list that you add here using the Add List button. You'll also find the option to exclude a list of QIDs from a scan. However, when configuring vulnerability detection, Qualys recommends using the Complete option. The idea is to scan for everything and then use the filtering options in a report template to help you focus on specific types or groups of vulnerabilities. It's considered a best practice to perform your assessment scans in authenticated mode. You'll find authentication options for various devices, operating systems, and protocols listed here under Authentication. The lab targets in this course require Windows and Unix authentication. Remember, you'll need to create an appropriate authentication record for each authentication option you select here in the option profile. With an option profile selected, I'll return to the Launch Scan window and use the drop-down menu to view my scanner appliance options. The default scanner appliance will vary from account to account depending on the configuration of the scanners you've already deployed, as well as the list of host assets your scan is targeting. If you're using a Qualys student trial account, the Qualys Cloud pool of external scanners is your default option, which will override the message that says scanner appliance not available. Notice that you can also explicitly select the external scanner pool. The All Scanners in Asset group, All Scanners in Tag Set, and Build My List options are designed for using multiple scanner appliances for completing a scan task. My final scanner appliance option is a virtual scanner that I have deployed on my local area network. This is the scanner appliance I would normally select when targeting internal host assets with private IP addresses. I'll select the external option for our public-facing lab targets. The final scan component allows you to target specific hosts or groups of hosts within your subscription. With the Assets Radio button selected, you can specify your scan target using any combination of asset groups in your account, or you can specify your target using a single IP address or an entire IP address range. The Exclude IPs option can be used with both asset groups and IP address range targets. To select asset tags as your scan target, you'll need to select the Tags Radio button and then add the tags you wish to target. Under the Asset Groups hierarchy, you'll find matching asset tags for each asset group added to your account. My scan is now targeting the IPs in the San Jose asset group using an asset tag. If you add more than one asset tag to your scan target, you'll need to select the appropriate Boolean operator. All is the Boolean and equivalent, any is the Boolean or equivalent. For example, selecting all will only target host assets that have both the Windows desktop and the San Jose asset group tag. The Do Not Include option uses tags to exclude host assets from your scan. Before launching my scan, I'll give it a title that will make it easy to identify, and then click the Launch button. You can monitor the progress of your scan using the Scan Status window that is automatically displayed. Or if you prefer, you can click the Close button and monitor your scan from the Scans tab. All scans begin in queued status before they begin running. Look for this green ball icon to identify finished scans that have been properly added and normalized into your account scan history. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will take a quick look at the raw scan results produced after completing a vulnerability assessment scan. The raw scan results from the vulnerability assessment scans you have already performed are listed here under the Scans tab. These raw scan results are also referred to as scan-based findings. The total number of individual scan results stored here depends on your configuration of the Storage Setup option. By default, accounts are configured to automatically delete individual scan results once they reach the age of 6 months. You can adjust this setting between 1 month and 13 months. These settings do not impact PCI scan results, which must be stored for 2 years according to the PCI Council's requirements. Also, these settings only impact scan-based findings and do not impact host scan history, or what Qualys refers to as host-based findings. Returning to the Scans tab, I'll use the Quick Actions menu to view the results of a recent scan. The summary section at the top of the report includes information like the scan date, time, and duration, information about the host assets targeted, the IP address of the scanner appliance, and a short summary of authentication results. To view vulnerability findings, I'll need to scroll down to the Detailed Results section. By default, a raw scan report is designed to display all scan findings and details, including information gathered findings, potential vulnerability findings, and of course confirmed vulnerability findings. Simply expand any of the findings to view the vulnerability details, such as the vulnerability title, QID number, solution for fixing or mitigating the vulnerability, and all other QID data items and information found in the Qualys knowledge base. A raw scan report contains everything. Later in the reporting section of this course, we'll explore the various report template filter options that will allow you to remove any information that is non-essential or not needed. One final note: the results section within a vulnerability, like the one you see here, identifies the information collected from the target host that produced the vulnerability finding. This is something your patch and mitigation teams may find useful. The appendix at the bottom of the report provides more details about the hosts that were successfully or unsuccessfully scanned, and a breakdown of the scanning options that were configured within the option profile that was used to perform the scan. For a different view or perspective of your scan results, use the toggle switch in the upper right corner of the Scans tab to change from List View to Calendar View. Calendar View will allow you to see scans that have already completed, as well as scans that are scheduled to launch soon. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. Vulnerability management is a continuous process, and Qualys publishes new vulnerability signatures daily. This video will outline steps to help you automate the vulnerability management lifecycle by scheduling daily or frequent vulnerability assessment scans. To schedule a scan, navigate to the Scan section, followed by the Scans tab. Click the New button and select the Schedule Scan option. Here you'll find the same scan configuration requirements as the manual scan seen earlier. You'll need to select an option profile, a scanner appliance, and the host assets you wish to target in the scan. Target host options include IP addresses and IP address ranges, asset groups, and asset tags. What obviously makes a scheduled scan different are the scheduling options. Begin by selecting the date and time for the scheduled scan to start. The start time for each scheduled scan will reflect the time zone you specify. To keep this scan from bumping into high demand or peak capacity times of day, you can choose a maximum scan time and the action to take if any scan reaches this threshold. If you configure the option to pause a long-running scan, you'll need to specify how and when you would like it to resume. You can schedule your scans to run daily, weekly, or monthly. You can schedule scans that have an unlimited number of occurrences, or select the option to deactivate a scheduled scan after a set number of occurrences is reached. Notifications will automatically be sent to the owner of a scheduled scanning task. Additional options are available for sending notifications before and after a scan to any email distribution groups you've created. Once a scheduled scan has been saved, it can be viewed along with other scheduled scans under the Schedules tab, where any scheduled scan can be quickly deactivated, activated, or deleted. Use the Calendar View option for a different perspective on your scans that have already finished and those that are scheduled to launch soon. Somewhat similar to scheduled scanning, Qualys Cloud Agent is configured with a setting called the Data Collection Interval. Qualys Cloud Agent is designed to collect assessment data from its host at regular intervals, which it then sends to the Qualys Cloud Platform for processing. By default, agent data collection occurs every 4 hours, or 240 minutes. The agent data collection interval can be set anywhere from 4 hours to 30 days. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a quick overview of the tools and features provided by both the Vulnerability Management and Asset View applications that allow you to view, manage, and organize host assets within your Qualys subscription. Both Qualys VM and Asset View provide features and services for viewing host assets and asset details. They both provide the capability to search or query your host asset inventory to quickly identify and view host assets you wish to act upon. And for more effective asset management, they both provide a mechanism for grouping and labeling host assets within your subscription. We'll begin our overview inside the Vulnerability Management application before moving on to Qualys Asset View. Some of the topics and discussions in this overview will be addressed in greater detail in the videos that follow. We'll begin in the Qualys Vulnerability Management application. As we saw earlier, the Host Assets tab contains all of the host assets in your Vulnerability Management subscription. Here, each host asset is identified by its assigned tracking method, IP address, relevant host names, and installed operating system. To view more information about any host, simply click its information icon. For a different view or perspective of these assets, click the Applications tab. Here you'll find a comprehensive list of all the software applications discovered on the host assets in your subscription. Remember, scans must be performed in authenticated mode to produce a list of installed software applications. Use the search fields to find a specific application or filter the application list by asset group or IP address. Download an application list into a CSV file. The Ports and Services tab provides the same function as the Applications tab, only for host services rather than applications. The OS tab provides a breakdown of the operating systems discovered on host assets in your VM subscription. And the Certificates tab identifies the certificates installed on the same host assets. Here you can quickly identify host assets with expired certificates or other certificate issues that may need to be addressed. If you would like to run a custom query against your host asset inventory, click the Asset Search tab. You'll first need to select the host assets your query will target using any asset group, asset tag, or IP address range. A commonly used target is the asset group All, which contains all host assets in your subscription. Once you've selected a search target, you can then build your query using the available attributes. I'll construct a query to find all host assets that haven't been scanned in 90 days. A query of this type can potentially reveal inactive or retired host assets. Once I've constructed my query, my options are run a search, or I can use the criteria in my query to create an asset tag to help me label and identify my potentially inactive hosts. We'll look for this tag later in the Asset View application. One method for organizing the host assets in your account can be found under the Asset Groups tab. Asset groups commonly reflect an organization's geographic and network boundaries, device types and operating systems, system priority or criticality, asset ownership, or any other type of physical or logical grouping that defines the host assets in your organization. Asset groups are created and updated manually, which is very different than the asset tags we'll discuss in the next section. For now, simply understand that asset groups are created here in the Vulnerability Management application, and they provide a way to group the host assets in your subscription into manageable units that can then be used as targets for scanning, reporting, and other activities. We'll take a much closer look at asset groups in the Asset Groups video that follows. We'll now take a look at the tools and features provided by Qualys Asset View to help you manage your asset inventory. Qualys Asset View is a core component of the Qualys Cloud Platform, where you can view the host assets in your VM subscription, as well as assets from other Qualys applications and modules. Here under the Asset View Assets tab, you'll find some of the same information we saw earlier, such as the asset name and its associated operating system. But because Asset View is a central repository for multiple Qualys applications, you'll also find a column for each asset's licensed application modules. The Tags column identifies each asset's associated asset tags. Since most of the tags are dynamic in nature, the tags displayed in this column can potentially change over time as changes are made to its host system. All Cloud Agent host assets are automatically labeled with a Cloud Agent tag. Additional asset information and details can be displayed by selecting View Asset Details from any asset's Quick Actions menu. In addition to the asset summary, most assets will provide a list of open ports and installed software applications. Depending on the application modules licensed for any asset, the rest of the details available may include vulnerability findings, real-time threats associated with the vulnerability findings, compliance findings, file integrity events, indications of compromise, and any alerts generated by other Qualys applications. Please note that file integrity monitoring and indication of compromise are exclusively Cloud Agent applications. FIM and IOC details are only available for agent host assets. The search field here at the top of the Assets tab allows you to query your entire asset inventory from a single location. The help icon at the right end of the search field will provide you with some quick lessons on how to search, including syntax requirements for string matching, range and date searches, using Boolean operators, building nested queries, and more. Click to view the navigation pane, where you can view a comprehensive list of all asset search fields, along with descriptions and examples. For this demonstration, I'll perform a search to find assets running a Windows-based operating system. Notice that as I begin to type operating system, Interactive Help provides a list of the search fields that contain the characters I have typed, along with a description and syntax examples of the search parameters. Using the character string Windows, my asset inventory results set is quickly updated to show all Windows-based host assets. With a small adjustment, I can change the original query to focus on a specific operating system version. Logical or Boolean operators allow me to combine multiple conditions into a single query. Any query you create can be saved for later use. Or use your query to create a dashboard widget. You'll find your saved searches here. I'll use one of my saved searches to create a widget. Widgets display the results of AssetView queries using the available graphic options. There's the Count widget, Table widget, Bar Chart widget, and Pie Chart widget. Widgets are saved to AssetView dashboards, which are comprised of one or more widgets that instantly and graphically provide different views and abstractions of your AssetView inventory. The Qualys AssetView and Threat Protection self-paced training course provides numerous illustrations and examples of creating and using dashboard widgets. Asset tags provide another mechanism for grouping or labeling your assets. Expand the asset group's hierarchy to find a matching tag for every asset group added to your account. The inactive tag, the one I created earlier from within the Vulnerability Management application, can be found here in the Asset Search Tags hierarchy. Any tag created using VM's Asset Search will initially be placed in the Asset Search Tags hierarchy. To better illustrate its nested design structure, I'll expand the operating system asset tag hierarchy. Parent tags in this nested structure are associated with a broader range of host assets than their child tags, which are more specific and associated with a smaller subset of host assets. Notice that the Windows tag in this hierarchy plays both the parent and child role. When asset tags are used as scanning or reporting targets, this nested structure makes it easier to identify and select the appropriate scope for your scanning or reporting task. One of the biggest advantages to using asset tags comes from the various dynamic rule engines, which allow an asset tag to dynamically change and automatically update, along with the changes made to its host system. When information collected from any host matches a rule that you've created, the rule's associated tag will be assigned to the host. We'll take a closer look at designing and building asset tags in the asset tag video that follows. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video demonstrates how to create and use asset groups to manage host assets in your subscription. We'll look at using asset groups as scanning and reporting targets, and using asset groups to assign host access privileges to Qualys users. As we've seen earlier, there's a lot of different ways to build and design an asset group. The question that will help you determine which asset groups you need is how do you intend to use the asset groups that you create. For example, asset groups are commonly used as targets for performing vulnerability scans, in which case you might prefer to scan by subnet, or you might run separate scans for different host operating systems. You might even run high-priority scans for mission-critical systems. Whatever technique you prefer, you can typically build multiple asset groups that reflect your customary or regular scanning targets. When building asset groups for reporting, when using asset groups as the report source, the objective is to include only those host assets that are of interest to your target audience. Host assets that fall outside of this scope will simply add noise and complexity to a report. If you have operational or patch teams that are dedicated to specific groups of host assets, you can construct remediation policies for these assets using asset groups. And finally, asset groups provide a mechanism for assigning host access privileges to the various user accounts within your Qualys subscription. When used for this purpose, it's best to design and use asset groups that meet the needs of your users without exceeding the access privileges required. To create or update an asset group, click the Assets menu here in the Vulnerability Management application, followed by the Asset Groups tab. Use the Quick Actions menu to edit any existing asset groups, or click the New button to create a new asset group. Enter a title for your asset group that best describes its host assets or members. You can specify the asset group members by host IP address, DNS name, or NetBIOS name. The DNS name and NetBIOS name options are available through the Scan by Host Name feature, which has been enabled for all student trial accounts. For this demonstration, I'll identify my asset group members by their IP addresses. If you already know the IPs you have in mind, you can enter them here in the text box. You can select your IPs from other asset groups you've already created. Or click the Select IPs link to select from a list of all IP addresses already in your subscription. You can associate one or more domain names with your asset group members. The mapping function built into the Vulnerability Management application uses domain names as mapping targets. Assigning domain names to asset groups in this fashion will allow you to delegate mapping responsibilities by assigning this asset group to another Qualys user account. If you add one or more scanner appliances, you'll then have the option of choosing a default scanner for this asset group. Also, adding multiple scanner appliances to an asset group gives you the advantage of using more than one scanner appliance for completing scanning tasks that use this asset group as a scanning target. The business impact setting is best used when all asset group members reflect the same level of importance or criticality to your organization. Asset groups can be labeled from low to critical. The setting you choose here will be factored into something called the business risk score, which gives a higher weight to the vulnerabilities that are detected on more critical host assets. High is the default business impact setting for all new asset groups. I'll save my San Jose asset group. Now that my asset group has been saved, I'll demonstrate using it in scanning and reporting tasks in the video that follows. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will demonstrate using asset groups as both scanning and reporting targets, as well as using asset groups to assign host access privileges to Qualys user accounts. We'll begin with an example of using asset groups as a scanning target, followed by using asset groups as the source of a report, and finish up with an example of using asset groups to assign host access privileges. Here in the Vulnerability Management application, I'll navigate to the Scans tab to launch a new scan. When using an asset group as your scanning target, the default scanner appliance setting depends on how the target asset group is configured. Adding one or more scanner appliances to an asset group and designating a default scanner will impact the use of the default scanner appliance option. For this scan, I'll use the Qualys external scanner pool. With the Assets radio button selected, here under Choose Target Hosts, I'll use the drop-down menu to add one or more asset groups as my scanning target. Add or remove asset groups to match your intended target. The Select link provides another way to view and select target asset groups. Even though I'm using an asset group as my target, I can still exclude one or more host assets from this scan using the Exclude IPs option. By default, the IP addresses of agent host assets will not appear as part of your scanning subscription. The option to temporarily add agent addresses to your scanning subscription will appear if you install Qualys Cloud Agent on a host, and it will allow you to include agent host assets in your list of scanning targets. With the appropriate target selected, I'll click the Launch button. My scan is now queued and will begin running in a moment. When at least one vulnerability scan has been successfully completed, you can navigate to the Reports tab to build a custom report that helps you analyze your scan findings and distribute these findings to the appropriate patching and mitigation teams. For this example, I'll create a patch report. Here under Report Source, I'll use the drop-down menu to add one or more asset groups as the source of my report. When selecting asset groups, simply consider your target audience. If this report targets the Windows patch team, the Windows asset group becomes the most logical choice as the report source. Selecting the asset group that provides the best fit for your target audience will keep the focus of your report on the intended assets, while precluding other host data from adding report noise and complexity. I'll click Run to build a patch report for the targeted asset group. When creating or modifying a Qualys user account, click Asset Groups to view or edit the host assets a user can access. Presently, this user with a scanner role does not have any asset groups in his account. Only by adding one or more asset groups will this user be able to launch scans or create reports. It's typically a good idea to allocate only the necessary access privileges a user needs to do their job, without exceeding their required access needs. You should avoid using the asset group All for allocating access privileges to users, and instead build custom asset groups designed for this purpose. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will demonstrate how to use asset groups to scan by hostname. Although it is common to use IP addresses or asset groups that contain IP addresses as scanning targets, with the Scan by Hostname feature enabled for your account, you can identify the targets of your scans using DNS names or NetBIOS names. To accomplish this, you must meet the requirements listed here. First, the Scan by Hostname service must be enabled for your Qualys account. If you are using a Qualys student trial account to perform the lab exercises in this course, Scan by Hostname is already enabled. Second, use the DNS or NetBIOS options to add members to an asset group. This asset group, with its hostname members, will then become your scanning target. Any scanner appliance that will be used to perform the scan must be configured with a DNS server that can resolve the hostname to its IP address. Finally, only host names resolved to IPs in your subscription will be scanned. With the Scan by Hostname service already enabled in my account, I'll create an asset group with hostname members. I'll build this asset group using the DNS names of our training lab targets. This will work well with the external scanner option, as each host in our lab has a fully qualified domain name that resolves to its IP address on public DNS servers. You can enter each hostname on a separate line as I've done here, or you can use a single line with each hostname separated by a comma. My hostname asset group is now saved, and as long as its associated IPs are already in my subscription, it's ready to be used as a scanning target. With my hostname asset group created, I can now use it to launch a scan. Remember, for this scan to be successful, any scanner appliance that will be used to perform the scan must be configured with a DNS server that can resolve the host name to its IP address. And only host names that resolve to IPs in your subscription will actually be scanned. I'll click the New button to launch a new scan. Select the San Jose DNS Names asset group as my scanning target, and launch. Here under the Scans tab, my scan is now running, and easily distinguished by the DNS names in the Targets column. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video demonstrates how to create and use asset tags to manage host assets in your subscription. Asset tags are a core component within the Qualys Cloud platform, and through the use of asset tag rule engines, they adjust dynamically and automatically to changes made to your host assets. Before attempting to build or use asset tags, you'll want to make sure that asset tagging has been enabled for your account. To do this, use your Account drop-down menu to select the Account Settings option. From here, click Security. Scrolling down to the new Data Security Model section, we can see that asset tagging has been enabled. If the account you are using does not have asset tagging enabled, as depicted here, a manager user can accept the new data security model to enable asset tagging, along with some other advanced platform services. In a moment, I'll demonstrate the steps for building asset tags. Before I do, let's take a quick look at some of the basic asset tag behaviors and characteristics. First, not all asset tags are dynamic. You can build static tags that you would then manually assign to selected host assets within your account. Static tags are commonly used to establish the starting point for individual asset tag hierarchies. Dynamic tags, on the other hand, are automatically assigned to host assets based on their rule engine. Asset tag rule engines focus on different host attributes, and when these attributes change, so do their respective tags. Asset tags are commonly grouped or organized into asset tag hierarchies. These hierarchies allow you to nest one asset tag below another, creating various parent-child relationships. The idea or objective is to build child tags that represent a subset of host assets already represented by its associated parent tag. Earlier, I demonstrated creating an asset tag using VM's Asset Search. For this demonstration, I'll create a tag in Qualys Asset View. Here from within the Tags tab. I'll begin by creating a static parent tag that will serve as the starting point for a hierarchy that contains software application tags, or tags designed to identify host assets that are running certain software applications. I'll leave the tag rule engine set to the No Dynamic Rule option to create a static tag. My application's hierarchy now has a starting point where I will begin to nest child tags. I'll use the Quick Actions menu to add a child tag to the application's hierarchy. This tag will identify host assets running the MySQL database application. Notice that Applications is already identified as the parent tag. However, unlike its parent tag, this tag will use a dynamic rule engine. Each dynamic rule engine focuses on different asset characteristics, such as the name of the asset's IP address, open ports discovered, the host's operating system, software installed on the host, or vulnerabilities detected on the host. The asset search engine pertains to tags created using VM's Asset Search. And the Cloud Asset Search Engine will help you create tags for your assets hosted by a cloud provider such as Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. I'll select Installed Software. Enter a simple regular expression that will match all versions of MySQL, and select the option to ignore case. The testing tool will allow you to apply or test this rule against your current asset inventory. Assets will display a check mark if its application data collected matches the expression in this rule. Assets that do not have data or applications matching the expression will display an X. I'll select the option to reevaluate this rule against my current asset inventory when it is saved, and then continue and finish to save. My application's hierarchy now contains a dynamic tag that will automatically be assigned to host assets running MySQL. And because I selected the option to reevaluate the tag rule on save, I can quickly find its associated assets. In the next video, we'll take a quick look at using asset tags as scanning and reporting targets. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will demonstrate using asset tags in the Qualys Vulnerability Management application to complete scanning and reporting tasks. We'll begin with using asset tags as scanning targets. Here under the Scans tab, I'll click the New button to launch a new scan. My scan title, option profile, and scanner appliance have already been configured, so we can focus our attention on choosing a scan target. To use one or more asset tags as my scan target, I'll select the Tags Radio button and click the Add Tag link. If I already know the name of my tag, I can enter it here in the search field. Or I can click the Browse Tags icon to view the search field along with an expandable asset tag tree. The benefit of a nested tag structure is demonstrated best in the operating system's hierarchy. A scan that targets a parent tag like Operating System or Windows will automatically target its child tags. If the Windows tag is your scan target, the Windows Desktop and Windows Server tags are included by default. To target a broader scope of host assets, select asset tags near the top of the asset tag hierarchy. For a more focused scan, select tags near the bottom. Expanding the location hierarchy, I'll demonstrate the process of combining multiple tags as your scan target. Suppose you want to run a scan that targets Windows servers in San Jose. Accomplishing this task requires one tag from the location hierarchy, San Jose, and another tag from the operating system hierarchy, Windows Server. When more than one tag is selected as a target, the operator you select will determine how each tag is evaluated. The Any operator will target any host asset that has either the San Jose or the Windows Server tag. The All operator will only target host assets that have both the San Jose and the Windows Server tags. The Any operator is the Boolean or equivalent. The All operator is the Boolean and equivalent. When using asset tags as your target, you also have the option of selecting one or more tags to exclude specific assets from your scan. By default, the IP addresses of agent host assets will not appear as part of your scanning subscription. The option to temporarily add agent addresses to your scanning subscription will appear if you install Qualys Cloud Agent on a host, and it will allow you to include agent host assets in your list of scanning targets. With the appropriate target selected, I'll click the Launch button. My scan is now queued and will begin running in just a few moments. When creating any type of report, asset tags once again provide good options for the report source. This patch report will be created for all San Jose hosts, but will exclude inactive hosts, hosts with the inactive tag, until the inactive assets can be investigated to determine their operational status. This is a popular technique to prevent retired or suspect assets from appearing in your reports. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a quick overview of the different Asset View data sources and then highlights the data and information provided by Asset View connectors. The Qualys Asset View application collects its data and asset inventory information using one or more data collection technologies, including Qualys scanner appliances, Qualys virtual scanners, and Qualys cloud agents. This first group of technologies provide data that is used for both assessment and asset inventory purposes. When enabled for Asset View, Connectors provide an additional stream of asset inventory data from your assets hosted by popular cloud providers, including Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Although you'll find connectors for other Qualys applications, like Qualys Cloud View and Qualys Asset Inventory, the focus of this video will be on connectors in Qualys Asset View. Connectors function independently of scans, providing inventory data from your assets hosted by a cloud provider. Please note that connectors for Asset View are not enabled for Qualys student trial accounts. The account I am presently using has Asset View connectors enabled for AWS and Azure. You can configure one or more Asset View connectors for your different AWS and Azure accounts. Connectors are designed to synchronize your cloud-based asset inventory at regular intervals, and can be configured to automatically add cloud assets to your subscription. This, of course, is an option and can be configured differently for each connector you create. Once you've created and properly configured a connector, you can use its Quick Actions menu to show the cloud-based assets it discovered or identified. Connectors can be configured to automatically assign tags that uniquely identify your cloud-based assets, like I've done here with the AWS EC2 tag. Any data collected by a connector becomes a part of the Asset View asset inventory, and is searchable using Asset View Search. I'll modify this query to display AWS assets that are terminated. Use the Quick Actions menu of any asset to view its details. The connector by itself provides some asset summary information and vendor-specific metadata. With the deployment of Qualys virtual scanner appliances or agents to your AWS or Azure account, you can also receive open port and installed software information, vulnerabilities detected, threats associated with the detected vulnerabilities, file integrity events, indications of compromise, and alerts generated by other Qualys applications. The functionality of my Azure connector is very similar to what I've already demonstrated with AWS. The Quick Actions menu of the connector can be used to display my Azure assets. Notice that my Azure assets will be labeled with the Azure tag, which is part of my connector's configuration. An asset summary and vendor-specific metadata is available for all of my Azure assets, which can be queried using Asset View Search. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video provides a quick overview of the different report types available in the Qualys Vulnerability Management application. It will describe the different components that comprise a report and then demonstrate using these components to build a scan report. To create a report, navigate to the Reports tab and click the New button. A scan report will help you view and analyze the findings from your vulnerability scans, as well as assessments made from data collected by Qualys Cloud agents. A scan report template provides numerous options for displaying the technical details associated with each detected vulnerability. On the other end of the spectrum, scorecard reports present a high-level view of your scan results, with summary statistics and graphic illustrations of useful metrics. The mapping feature in Qualys VM provides a useful service for discovering new host assets. Some of the features that you'll find in a map report can simplify the task of creating asset groups or adding new assets to your account. A patch report is similar to a scan report in that it provides evidence of detected vulnerabilities. However, the focus of this report is on the patches that can be used to fix or mitigate detected vulnerabilities. Patch reports make it easier to see the number of host assets impacted by a single patch. Qualys recommends performing scans in authenticated mode. However, the benefits gained from this practice will not be seen if the authentication attempted by your scanner appliance fails or is obstructed in some other way. The authentication report will help you to quickly identify authentication issues with details that will help you resolve the problem at hand. Remediation reports will help you identify the patch or mitigation teams responsible for specific vulnerabilities and help you assess their performance. These reports can be especially useful for quickly locating overdue patches and preventing potential process bottlenecks. If you use Qualys VM to perform PCI compliance scans, The compliance report option can be used to produce PCI executive and technical reports. The asset search report is an extension of VM's asset search, where the results out of your asset search queries can be saved directly to your choice of popular file formats. Most of the report types listed here require an assessment or scan from a Qualys scanner appliance or data collected from agents before you can successfully build a report. The exception is the asset search report, which only requires one or more host assets in your subscription. However, keep in mind that the accuracy of an asset search report is greatly improved after completing an assessment or scan first. In a moment, we'll take a quick look at the components required to build or run a report, and then we'll return here to the Reports tab to run a scan report. This diagram illustrates the basic components needed to build any of the report types just described. With the exception of scorecard reports, authentication reports, and asset search reports, which do not require a report template. All report types require that you select a report source or the assets you intend to target in your report. You can accomplish this using a range of IP addresses or even a single IP, or any asset groups or asset tags you've created. For the report types that require a report template, you can choose a custom template that you've created or select one from the Qualys Report Template library. A report template provides dozens of options for selecting the data and findings that will be included in your report, how that data will be displayed, and who will be able to view the reports that are generated. We'll take a much closer look at template options in the report template video that follows. Notice that a Qualys scanner appliance is not included in this diagram. Running a report does not in any way launch a scan. Scanning and reporting are separate tasks, and therefore scans must be completed prior to building their associated reports. I'll now demonstrate using a report template and report source to build a scan report. Before running a report, I'll first verify my scan results here under the Scans tab. Both of my scans have finished and display icons that indicate all data processing is complete, which means that I have scan data available for reporting. Assessment activity from agent host assets can be verified from within the Cloud Agent application, Qualys Asset View, and the Host Assets tab here in the Vulnerability Management application. With my scan and assessment activity verified, I'll run a scan report from the Reports tab. Notice that the scan report has a separate template for PCI scans. I'll use the standard template. I've given my report a descriptive title, and now I'll select a report template that defines different display and filtering options. The high severity template will filter out lower severity vulnerabilities. Different output file formats are available. I'll select HTML. The report template that I chose has the San Jose asset group enabled as the default report source, but I can easily change this to some other report source target. An option is available if I want to schedule this report to run at a later time or date or at reoccurring intervals. For now, I'll just click Run to build a high-severity vulnerability report for my San Jose assets. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will take a closer look at creating and using report templates. Report templates allow you to select from dozens of filtering and display options, which are then saved and used again and again to conveniently reproduce the same report behavior. Report templates can be customized for different target audiences within your organization. A report template simply takes the data and information from your raw scan results and formats, filters, and displays this information in a way that is meaningful and useful to its target audience. For example, the executive and technical report templates can both be configured with the same data source or report source. But the executive template will present vulnerability findings in a fashion that is more suitable for executive or managerial members of your organization, providing helpful graphics and summary statistics, but omitting the type of details that are more useful to patching and mitigation teams. The technical report template, on the other hand, is more suitable for members of your operational teams because it focuses on the information and details needed to patch and mitigate detected vulnerabilities. Here under the Templates tab, you'll find pre-built templates for many useful reporting tasks. And you can import more templates from the template library. Let's open up a scan report template to examine some of its options. Here in the Vulnerability Management application under the Templates tab, I'll click the New button to create a new scan report template. After giving my template a name, I have the option to make it global, which will allow other Qualys accounts to access and use this template. In the template findings, I'll need to choose between the host-based findings and scan-based findings options. The scan-based findings in your account are comprised of each individual vulnerability scan performed, where each scan tells a unique story based on its position or placement within your scanning timeline. Reports that use scan-based findings are often referred to as snapshot reports because they represent an individual snapshot in time without any influence from scans that have been performed previously or scans that have occurred later in time. You'll find all of your scan-based findings listed under the Scans tab. All scan-based findings are poured into another bucket or database known as the host-based findings. The host-based findings database collects data from completed scans and indexes each detected vulnerability according to the tracking method you have selected for each host asset. Host-based findings will allow you to view the vulnerability history of any host asset. And unlike scan-based findings, host-based findings allow you to create vulnerability trend reports that track the status of any vulnerability, from new to active, fixed, or reopened. Please note that agent host assets running Qualys Cloud Agent, do not have scan-based findings. All agent data and findings are normalized directly into the host-based findings database. Returning to my new scan report template, I'll leave the host-based findings selected and include trending over the last 3 months. The host targets you choose here in the template will become the default report source when this template is used to generate a report. Notice again that your choices here include asset groups, IPs and IP address ranges, and asset tags. At the bottom of the findings section, you'll find special options for host assets running the Qualys Cloud Agent. If you ever decide to scan an asset running the Qualys Agent, the options provided here will allow you to distinguish between data collected from the agent and data collected from a Qualys scanner appliance when generating a report. The display options in a scan report template will allow you to add graphics to your report as well as selecting the details that are important to your target audience. Some of the graphic options are only available when trending is used. Although sorting by host is very common, there are other options for sorting the vulnerability details in your reports. A couple of special options are available that will include additional identification information and metadata for your agent or EC2 host assets. To actually display vulnerability details, you'll need to select the Vulnerability Details checkbox, and then individually select the details that are important to your target audience. You'll recall most of these details from the Qualys Knowledge Base discussion earlier in this course. A typical report will include the solution to fix or mitigate a vulnerability, and the results option will help your operational teams identify the information or evidence that produced a specific vulnerability finding. Otherwise, please consider your target audience when selecting additional details, and avoid adding information that doesn't meet the objective at hand. Up to this point, I've created a template that uses host-based findings, targets the San Jose asset group, and includes details such as the vulnerability solution and results. Here in the filter options of a scan report template, I can choose to include the complete list of detected vulnerabilities for each host, or I can choose the option to display a custom list of vulnerabilities in my reports. Adding a search list to a report template in this fashion provides a very useful benefit. You can perform vulnerability scans that target the complete list of vulnerability QIDs in the Qualys knowledge base, and then create reports that use a template like this to focus on specific groups or types of vulnerabilities. Managing your vulnerabilities in this fashion is a recommended best practice. Other options that are useful include filtering on vulnerability status, new, active, reopened, and fixed. To create a report that focuses exclusively on new vulnerabilities, I would simply remove the other checkmarks. State will allow you to choose from confirmed and potential vulnerability QIDs, and information gathered QIDs that are either active, disabled, or ignored within the Qualys knowledge base. In the context of the state filter, if you haven't disabled or ignored a knowledge base QID, its state is active. For example, the state filters can help you identify vulnerabilities that will not appear in your reports because they've been disabled in the Qualys knowledge base or have been ignored. The more common scenario is to select the checkboxes for the type of QIDs you would like to appear in your reports. The Services and Ports options will allow you to create reports that verify host assets are running required services, and that they are not running unauthorized services. And finally, the user access settings will allow you to specify or identify other Qualys users that will be granted permission to access reports generated by this template. The test button can be used at any time during report template configuration to test the results of the various options you've selected. This can be very helpful when experimenting with new or different report template options. For now, I'll just click Save. Once a template has been saved, it can be used to run reports directly from the Templates tab. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. In this video, we'll examine the impact of adding real-time threat indicators to your existing vulnerability data and findings using the Qualys Threat Protection application. Traditionally, the Qualys Vulnerability Management application has relied on severity levels to help you calculate the risk associated with your detected vulnerabilities. The higher the severity level, the greater the risk. With the addition of the Threat Protection application to the Qualys Cloud Platform, this calculation is improved by including known threats into the risk equation, which can have a significant impact on vulnerabilities of all severity levels. The goal of Qualys Threat Protection is to help you pinpoint your assets that have the highest exposure to the latest known threats, so that you can prioritize and mitigate their high-risk vulnerabilities quickly. Here in the Qualys Threat Protection application, we can view the live feed of threats that are maintained by Qualys' worldwide team of engineers and other Qualys security partners. Qualys engineers constantly monitor and track threat data, including information on attacks, exploits, and exploit kits. The threat data and information collected is used to distinguish different threat attributes and behaviors, creating the different categories of real-time threats that you see here. Vulnerabilities with public exploits are those where exploit knowledge is well known and working exploit code is publicly available. Easily exploited vulnerabilities are associated with attacks that can be carried out easily and typically do not require additional information. Actively attacked vulnerabilities are those where active attacks are being observed in the wild. If a vendor has not provided an official fix for a vulnerability, it will be listed as no patch available. Zero-day vulnerabilities are characterized by active attacks observed in the wild and no patch available from the vendor, which is a combination of the last two categories. High data loss vulnerabilities can potentially result in massive data loss on the affected host. A high lateral movement vulnerability that is successfully exploited will potentially allow an attacker to compromise other assets on the network. Denial of service vulnerabilities can adversely impact host and application availability. Some vulnerabilities are associated with exploit kits like Angler, Nuclear, Rig, and others. And other vulnerabilities are associated or targeted by known malware applications. Returning to the Threat Protection application, I'll navigate to the Assets section to demonstrate using real-time threat indicators in a query. Presently, I have 9 assets in my account. By typing the word threat in the search field, the interactive help will list the threat tokens for all the real-time threat indicators. Most of the tokens are Boolean, so to view assets that have 0-day vulnerabilities, I'll select the 0-day token and set its value to true. 3 of my assets presently have 0-day vulnerabilities. 2 of the impacted assets are members of the San Jose Asset Group, and one host is running the Qualys agent. To view the list of affected vulnerabilities, I'll group the assets in my result set by vulnerabilities. Threat tokens can also be combined with other search variables. In this example, I'm only searching for severity 4, 0-day vulnerabilities. Only one of my host assets matches the new search criteria. Now that you are somewhat familiar with Qualys Threat Protection, I'll return to the Vulnerability Management application to demonstrate how Threat Protection real-time threat indicators can be used to extend the capabilities of a search list. Back in the Vulnerability Management application, I'll use a search list to recreate the 0-day example I just demonstrated in the Threat Protection application. I'll create a dynamic list which provides the regular list criteria options, but now includes the Threat Protection RTIs as a result of enabling the Threat Protection application in my account. I'll use the list criteria to select my target severity levels. And then click Threat Protection RTI to select 0-day, and then save. I'll now demonstrate using the search list I just created as a Scan Report Template filter option. Here in the Scan Report template, I've already configured my findings and display options, so we can focus on the filter options. I'll select Custom to attach my 0-day QID search list. And then click the Test button. Adding my 0-day search list to a custom report template produces the same vulnerability findings produced by the Threat Protection query I created earlier. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. In this video, I'll identify and define the various Qualys user roles and discuss the topic of user management, including creating and editing user accounts, configuring your Qualys account security preferences, and working with business units. When you create a user account, the user role you assign to the account will determine the user's default access privileges. This diagram illustrates the standard user roles that are typically assigned to Qualys user accounts. The least privileged roles are near the bottom of the diagram, and the roles with the greatest privileges are listed near the top. In typical hierarchical fashion, higher-level roles automatically include the privileges of roles listed beneath them. For example, the default privileges for the scanner role automatically include the privileges for both the reader and remediation user roles. The remediation user role provides a convenient way to assign detected vulnerabilities to specific Qualys users. Users with this role can log into the Vulnerability Management application, but are limited to viewing their assigned vulnerabilities and accessing the Qualys knowledge base. Readers can run reports and, depending on their host access privileges, read reports created by other Qualys users. The scanner role performs scanning tasks, which also include mapping. The unit manager role has special extended privileges designed for the management of business units. The most privileged users are managers. They have full privileges and access to all the assets in your subscription. Managers and unit managers are responsible for managing assets and users. Managers have management authority for the entire subscription, while unit managers only have authority over their assigned business units. To create a user account in the Vulnerability Management application, navigate to the Users tab here within the Users section. Notice that I've already created several accounts with different user roles. It's important to create at least one additional user account with manager privileges for backup purposes. To create an account, I'll click the New button and select User. You'll need to fill out the general information fields, those that are marked with an asterisk. The email address you specify will determine where the new login account credentials are sent. As mentioned earlier, the user role you select will determine the default privileges and permissions for this account. Notice that this list contains some user roles that I have not yet addressed. Let's take a quick look at the auditor, contact, and user administrator roles. The auditor user role was created for the Qualys Policy Compliance application and does not have privileges in Qualys VM. A contact user can be configured to receive email notifications from the Qualys Cloud Platform. Contact users do not have login credentials. Similar to the unit manager, the user administrator was designed to help manage other user accounts in your subscription while avoiding the risk of creating too many manager accounts. This role only has access to users, asset groups, business units, and distribution groups. The knowledge base only role is not enabled by default and is used primarily for accessing the Qualys knowledge base. Returning to my new user account, I'll keep the scanner user role and navigate to asset groups. Asset groups that you add here will determine the scope of this user's scanning and reporting privileges. To increase this user's access to host assets, simply add more asset groups. Or remove asset groups to reduce access. Extended permissions can be added to the default privileges of most user roles. Notification options can be configured to receive vulnerability update, scan completion, and other type of platform notifications. And two-factor authentication can be enabled for individual or selected user accounts. I'll save my new user account. The new account has been created and will remain in the pending activation status until its owner receives their credentials and logs in. Business units provide an effective way to divide and distribute the vulnerability management tasks and responsibilities within your Qualys subscription. The successful implementation of business units with unit managers provides an effective way to limit the total number of manager accounts in your Qualys subscription. I'll edit an existing business unit to view its components. Business units contain assets and users. Adding assets to a business unit is accomplished by adding asset groups. User accounts can be added in the same way. The unit manager is the primary contact for each business unit and will handle the administrative needs of the business unit members. The role of business unit manager comes with special extended privileges for managing assets and users within the scope of a business unit, and a business unit can have more than one unit manager. Only manager users can edit the default security options for your Qualys account. To adjust your account security settings, navigate to the Setup tab here under the Users section and click Security. The security setup changes you make here will affect all user accounts in your subscription. You can restrict access to your account subscription by client IP address or IP address range. Be very careful with this option though, as a mistyped IP address could potentially lock out all user accounts, including managers. The password security options will allow you to set password expiration intervals, account lockout thresholds, password strength requirements, and even an option to let users define their own passwords. If two-factor authentication is enabled here, it will affect all user accounts in your subscription. Your other option is to configure two-factor authentication individually for each user account. The new data security model should be enabled to leverage services and features such as scheduled reporting, asset tagging, cloud agent, and more. The session timeout threshold configured here will become the default session timeout threshold for all user accounts. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video. This video will identify the basic components of a remediation policy, and it will demonstrate creating policies that assign detected vulnerabilities to individual Qualys users, as well as building policies to ignore specific vulnerabilities. Navigating to the remediation section here in the Vulnerability Management application, I'll click the Policies tab to view my existing remediation policies. Presently, I have one policy that assigns zero-day vulnerabilities, detected in San Jose, to a specific Qualys user in my account, and a second policy that assigns zero-day vulnerabilities, detected in Seattle, to a different Qualys user. If vulnerabilities of these types are detected, the remediation or mitigation deadline is 1 day. In other words, they need to be fixed immediately. These deadlines can be adjusted for different types of vulnerabilities that have different mitigation requirements. For example, let's create a new rule or policy that targets all Adobe vulnerabilities. Remediation policies contain two basic components: conditions that identify the targets of the policy, and actions that identify the task to be performed if the target conditions are met. Since this policy will target all Adobe vulnerabilities, I'll leave the asset group set to all, although I could easily select a different asset group or asset tag. Under Vulnerabilities, I'll add a search list that contains the vulnerability QIDs this policy will target. In this case, Adobe vulnerabilities, which can also be found in the search list library. My policy now identifies the conditions that will trigger an action I will now configure. I'll keep the default action to create an open ticket for each detected vulnerability that meets this policy's conditions. Think of a ticket as an audit trail for each detected vulnerability. An audit trail that identifies the specific Qualys user assigned to this vulnerability and the deadline and the number of days this user has to fix or mitigate the associated vulnerability. I'll assign detected vulnerabilities to a remediation user account, which was designed just for this purpose, and set the deadline to 21 days. And then click Save. The policy I just created goes straight to the bottom of the policy list, here under the Policies tab, which means that it is now last in the order of precedence. Policy precedence is evaluated from top down. Policies at the top of the list have precedence over the policies below them. You can click the New button to reorder your list of policies. The policy that is now at the bottom of the list is designed to ignore low-risk potential vulnerabilities that have no patch. I'll edit this policy so we can examine its components. Its condition uses asset tags to specify the host targets, and a search list identifies the vulnerabilities that will be targeted on each host. What makes this policy different is its action, which automatically ignores detected vulnerabilities and closes associated tickets. Alternatively, you can choose the option to reopen the closed tickets at a time or date you specify. The remediation policies I have created will act on the new data and findings as they are made available from both Qualys scanner appliances and Qualys agents. From here, you can build remediation reports that help you track the progress of vulnerabilities assigned to all users. Or, alternatively, navigate to the Tickets tab and use the Filters button to quickly locate all overdue tickets. Thank you for watching this Qualys training video.
Welcome to Qualys Vulnerability Management. In this video, we'll discuss mapping. In this video, you'll get an under-the-hood look at what is happening during a map. Then, you'll see how to define map targets, configure option profiles, and finally, how to launch a map. Mapping is done in the discovery phase of the vulnerability management lifecycle. Mapping is used to understand what hosts are in your network, but no vulnerability assessment is done during a map. It's simply a discovery. Three major parts are required for running a map. One requirement is targets. In other words, what exactly are you mapping? A domain or IP range. Next is the scanner appliance, which of course is what you will use to run your map. And finally, the option profile, which defines how your map will run. By simply knowing your domain, an attacker might then try to see what other information he can glean about your network. Qualys tries to emulate similar activity in a non-intrusive way to provide visibility on what is being exposed in your netblock or domain. Here are the general steps on what happens when you run a map. First, the service is going to look at the domain provided and do a whois. If an IP range was provided as the target, then the service will try to perform a reverse lookup to see if it can find a host name. It's important to remember, wherever you're mapping from, you will need layer 3 routing to map or scan a host. Qualys will then attempt to perform a zone transfer to see if it can find other IPs within the domain. The map will also try to take the domain name provided and perform a naming brute force to understand other hosts that may be associated with it. For instance, if I were to plug in qualys.com, the service would try to enumerate ftp.qualys.com, www.qualys.com, mail.qualys.com, and so on. There are about 100 of these brute force guesses, and it's simply trying to figure out other hosts associated with the domain. A trace route is run to understand the network and how it's being segmented. Next, Qualys will perform a live host sweep, where it will ping and attempt to discover hosts on 13 common TCP ports and 6 UDP ports, which are configurable. A response on any port tells the mapping service that the IP address is alive and there's an actual host there. Finally, the service does an OS fingerprint during the map. It will give you a best guess as to what the operating system is on the host. It does this by investigating the time to live, maximum segment size, window size, and TCP options on those responses from the target. Mapping is free in Qualys, but before you can run a map, you first need to define the targets in your account. In Qualys, you can map by domain or by IP address. You can also define asset groups which refer to domains or IPs. The place to add hosts as map targets is under Assets and then the Domains tab. You need to ensure either the domain or the IPs you'd like to map are in this section. Once you've added assets in this part of the UI, you'll be able to map them moving forward. Entering a domain is easy. Go to New, then Domains. From here, you'll enter your domain. You can expand it as well by using brackets to define a net block to the domain. If net blocks are defined for a domain, the service extends discovery beyond the domain to include IPs in the net blocks. Note, the mapping service gathers the least amount of information necessary to be as unobtrusive as possible. Of course, only run maps against domains and net blocks where you have permission. What if you don't want to use a specific domain? What if you want to just map a block of IP addresses? The none domain is a special domain that allows you to map IP ranges directly without associating the IPs with a registered domain name. You can define one none domain with multiple net blocks for your account. When the none domain is defined, you can map any of the IPs included in the net blocks. To launch a map, go to the Scan section and the Maps tab. Click New and then Map. From there, give your map a title. Select your option profile you'd like to use. Remember, the profile is what contains your configuration settings for the map. Then, select your scanner appliance you'll use. You can select an external or internal appliance, but again, that scanner needs to be able to get to the targets you define. Next, you'll define your targets. You can select domains or IPs you just entered in the Domains tab, or you can simply type them in here. Alternatively, you can use an asset group. An asset group is basically an organized selection of assets. For instance, you might have an asset group for assets in a particular location, like your Chicago assets, or a particular type of asset, like your Windows 2012 servers. Instead of constantly having to type in IP ranges within Qualys, asset groups make it easier for you to refer to your assets. Here in the map window, you can choose to select checkboxes underneath Mapping by Asset Group. Within an asset group, you can add IP addressing and/or domains. So this tells the service which part of the asset group you'd like to use as a target when you launch your map. If you go into the Assets section and the Asset Group tab, you'll see what I mean. Here, you can choose to define the targets in an asset group by IP address. Or you can tell the service you'd like to use a specific domain. When you run a map, you can run by domain, IP range, or both together, and the service will create separate map results for each. Whenever you run a map or scan, you will always need to select an option profile to tell the engine how it should work. In order to configure a new option profile, you have to navigate over to the Option Profiles tab under the Scan section. Then you can click New and select Option Profile. For mapping, there are two relevant locations within the option profile. Start with the Map tab. Here, you can tell the service to perform basic information gathering, like determine the operating system on specific targets in the map. You can tell it to do this for all hosts included in the map, or just hosts that are part of your subscription, or just hosts within the net block you defined. The ports you'll use for that enumeration are defined below. Notice you can customize this up to 20 ports. Also notice it's fairly small number of ports because mapping is meant to be lightweight. Underneath that, there is a feature checked by default called Perform Live Host Sweep. This setting is on by default. When disabled, devices will only be discovered using DNS discovery methods like DNS, reverse DNS, and DNS zone transfer. Qualys will not use the other ICMP and TCP mechanisms to discover devices. You'll want to be sure this setting is on, especially if you are mapping by NetBlock. You can also disable DNS traffic. This means no DNS reconnaissance will be done against the NetBlock during the map. Next are the performance settings. Configure map performance settings to determine the intensity and speed in which the service maps net blocks. The overall map performance level determines the number of net blocks to map in parallel, the number of IPs included in each net block, and the delay between groups of packets sent to each net block. Next, take a look at the Additional tab. Here you can set the ports that will determine whether or not a host is alive during the live host sweep. This provides an idea as to whether or not a device will respond to the scanner queries. You can change the TCP and UDP ports used for host discovery if you know your hosts would be discovered over different ports. There is also a relevant section called Packet Options. These options may be useful in certain scenarios. Sometimes a firewall will respond on behalf of a device sitting behind it. First, you can see the Ignore Firewall-Generated TCP Reset Packet option. When this option is selected, the scanning engine will try to identify firewall-generated TCP reset packets and ignore them. It is not always possible to actually determine whether or not a reset packet is firewall-generated. This is a best effort, And usually, a better practice is to place the scanner appliance you are using behind the firewall to map as though you were on the same segment. The scanning engine makes a best effort to identify firewall-generated reset packets. If the target for a scan or map is a range larger than a Class B, the scanning engine will not attempt to figure out whether reset packets are firewall-generated. It will just ignore all reset packets. You can also choose to select Ignore All Reset Packets. This option is used if you are trying to find assets that are only discoverable on certain ports. Similar to Ignore Firewall-generated reset packets, you can also tell the service to ignore firewall-generated SYNAC packets if a filtering device is responding with SYNACs, making a host appear as alive. Now let's take a look at some map results. We've run a map, and we can use the Quick Actions menu to view its results in a graphic mode, view the report itself, download it, or relaunch the map using the same settings. I'm going to view my report. At the top of the report, I'll get a report summary showing me the domain mapped, the hosts found, scanner appliance used, and the option profile I configured for this map. Below that, I see a set of results. It shows me the IPs found with host name, NetBIOS name, default gateway, and operating system. As I scroll down through this, I'll find an appendix section which lists a legend. Here, it breaks down the symbols you'll see in the right-hand column of my map results. A means approved. I can approve hosts as part of my map results, letting Qualys know that these hosts are allowed or belong to my network. All it is a manual flag that allows me to say I recognize this host. It's not a rogue host. It's only used in the mapping section, however. So you will not see the approve host flag in your scan results, only in maps. S means scannable. That means you've added the host to your subscription and it can be scanned. Up here, you can see some hosts have the S next to them in my results, and I've actually scanned them because they are hyperlinked and I would be able to see scan results on those hosts. L means live. When we actively tried to ping the host during the map, we got a response. If you see no L next to a host listed in your map results, it usually means we discovered it via DNS. But when we actively tried to ping it, we got no response. N means it's in the net block. If you ran a map via IP range and that host fell within the IP range you mapped, the N will appear next to it. If we discovered hosts outside of that net block, the N will not appear next to those hosts. Finally, you'll see your option profile settings. Thank you for watching this video on Qualys Vulnerability Management.